What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another Pokemon TCG Pocket Meta Report video. I'm going to be doing one of these Meta Report videos every week, either Monday or Tuesday. I think it's really cool to see all the tournament toppings, see all the data, and see where we stand in the current meta. And once again, we're looking at PokemonMeta.com. I am not sponsored or affiliated with this website in any way. I just really like their data, how it's presented, and all the information that we have on the tournament winning decks. So we're going to be taking a look at all the tournament topping decks. This tier list is based on all community tournaments, and I'm going to have timestamps in the description of this video to go over every single deck. So if there's one deck that you maybe want to go back and look at, you can go ahead and do that with the timestamps. So with that all out of the way, let's get into the tier list. We're going to be starting from top to bottom. And in tier 1, there's only two decks, same as last week, Mewtwo EX and Pikachu EX. But the difference is Mewtwo EX is now on top with the higher power level. And these power levels are decided based on tournament topping decks from all community tournaments. Now, I will say, I think this is right because I made a video, was it a week or 2 weeks ago, saying Mewtwo EX is the best deck in format. And I got a lot of comments saying like, yeah, Mewtwo EX is really good, but Pikachu EX is better. And, at the time the data showed, I was like, okay, maybe Pikachu EX is better. The data is showing that Pikachu EX is getting more tournament toppings, right? But now Mewtwo EX, the data is showing Mewtwo EX is now the best deck, and I really did think Mewtwo EX was the best deck in the format. It's, in my opinion, it's just once you get the Mewtwo Gardevoir combo, like there's just no beating that combo. It's just insanely good. With Pikachu EX, yes, you can hit for 90 with just 2 energy, but there's always a chance that you can come back and win the game, right? Especially with Pikachu himself is only has 120 HP, so he dies to a lot of things like Arcanine, Machamp, things like that. But anyways, let's go ahead and look at the Mewtwo deck first. So what is it that changed exactly, right? What changed to where Mewtwo is now the top deck? If we look at this example here, the top main deck, the main thing we'll see here is this non-EX Mewtwo. And I think this is the biggest change in the deck. People are starting to run this in the Mewtwo decks as a 1 of or 2 of. And essentially all it is it's just a tank. It's just there to stall, to take hits while you build up your Mewtwo EX's energy and while you evolve your Ralts into Kirlia, into Gardevoir. So this is the main thing here. And it only has a 2 retreat cost. It has 120 HP, which is very high for a non-EX Pokemon. So even if this does get KO'd, it's only worth 1 point. So this is the main change in the Mewtwo deck. It's just people are running a 1 or 2 of this non-EX Mewtwo. The rest of this deck looks pretty standard to me. I mean, you just want 2 of Mewtwo EX and 2 of the Ralts, Kirlia, Gardevoir, right? And then, yep, everything else looks pretty good to me. I like having a 1 of red card. This probably makes more sense in maybe like a tournament format rather than a ladder format, but I don't hate it either way. I think this is a very solid deck here. And yeah, I agree. I've been saying I think Mewtwo is still the best deck in the game right now. So that's Mewtwo. Let's go ahead and take a look at Pikachu EX now. Now, the thing that's interesting about Pikachu EX is there's still not currently one general consensus of one best version of Pikachu, right? There's several different versions here. If we look at top main deck, there's a lot of different cards here. Some cards are running, this Pink Urchin as maybe like a 1 of. Some people are running basic Pikachu into Raichu, into Surge. Some people are running Voltorb and Electrode. So there's a lot of different versions here. If we scroll down, you can see more specific decks here. So this sample deck from top 32, 256 player tournament on November 25th. This person is running 2 Pikachu EX, 2 Zapdos EX, 2 Blitzel, 2 Zebstrika, and 1 Pink Urchin. I would say for the most part, the trainer cards are pretty similar amongst all the Pikachu EX decks. Unless you're playing a Lieutenant Surge version, then they will have Surge if they're playing Raichu, right? But for the most part, this is what a lot of the Pikachu EX decks are going to look at. And let's take a look at some other versions, because while I do like the Blitzel and the Zebstrika to be able to snipe anything in the back line, I'm personally more a fan of the Electrode version, because I think Electrode is a really good card. So if we take a look at this first place deck, I was looking at this one earlier. This is a first place deck from November 25th. I think this is more in line with what I would personally want to run if I'm playing Pikachu EX. You got 2 Voltorbs into 2 Electrode. The reason I really like Electrode is just its attacks for 70 for 2 energy, which is very strong, and it has a free retreat. Sometimes that free retreat can come in handy, as 2 of the Zapdos EX is just a really good card, right? 2 Pikachu EX, and then 1 regular Zapdos EX. I don't hate this card, honestly. It's not bad. It's kind of similar to the non-EX Mewtwo in the sense that it's just a tank. It's there to stall, right? It has 100 HP, which is not bad. And its attacking move is not terrible. 3 energy. It deals 100 damage, but also does 30 damage to one of your bench Pokemon. So if you get really bad draws and you don't draw, you know, your Pikachu EX or Zapdos EX, then maybe this is something you want to rely on. So I think this is more in line with what I would play personally, but there are still a lot of different ways to play Pikachu at the moment. And still, these are the top 2 decks in Tier 1, with Mewtwo EX now taking over the #1 spot. And now, move over to Tier 2. Last week, there was no Tier 2. It was just Tier 1 and then 3, 4. But now we got a Tier 2, and we got my boy, Charizard EX. I absolutely love this deck. Now, if we take a look at the main deck here, we'll see, you know, you got the normal 2 of Charmander, 2 Charmeleon, 2 Charizard EX, right? 2 Moltres, nothing too crazy there. But now we see a couple of new additions. What I've been noticing is people are building this sort of Charizard Arcanine EX hybrid, right? So in this one, we got 2 of Arcanine EX, 1 of Growlithe, and then 1 of basic Charizard as well. I think this basic Charizard is just more so as a backup in case you don't draw your Charizard EXs. It's still a really good card. It's essentially the same as the EX version, except it's hitting for 150 instead of 200. It has 150 HP instead of 180, and it doesn't have the slash attack, but usually you're not using slash too often with Charizard EX, maybe every now and then, but most of the time you're just using the Crimson Storm, right? And then Arcanine EX here, I think it's interesting because you can kind of pivot into 2 different play lines, right? If you need to go a little bit faster, a little bit more aggressive with your game plan, then that's where Arcanine comes in, because he's a stage 1 evolution as opposed to a stage 2 Charizard EX, and he only takes 3 damage to attack instead of Charizard's 4 energy. And he does 120 damage, which is still very strong. It's going to clear a lot of Pokemon in the game. So this is what people have been kind of leaning into more as of late. And we see another sample deck here, top 32, 256 players. There is no basic Charizard in here, but they are running the 1 Growlithe and the 2 Arcanine EX. So yeah, it's looking good. It's looking good for Charizard. I've been a huge fan of this deck. Now, the one thing, the weakness is water type. And, you know, water is prevalent in the meta, but it's not too prevalent because Pikachu EX is keeping it at bay, right? There's a bit of a little triangle kind of meta going around, right? But that's a good thing, actually. We actually like that. Now with Tier 3, we're going to go ahead and get into Starmie EX. This deck is still amazing. What's really holding it back is Pikachu, since it's inherently weak to lightning decks. As you see with the top main deck here, we get a bunch of different cards, so it seems like there's multiple versions of Starmie running around as well. You can lean more into Starmie and Articuno, or perhaps Starmie and Greninja. If we take a look at this sample deck here, I think this is probably what's going to be more popular, the more popular version is the Articuno EX version, since this is just a really good card, right? So top 32 from 256 player tournament. We got 2 Staryu, 2 Starmie EX, 2 Articuno EX, and that's it for the Pokemon. The rest are just trainer cards here. Now, of course, you know, we have Double Misty. I hate this card. It's such a dumb card, you know. Maybe I'll make a whole video ranting about Misty. But when you win with this card, it doesn't feel fair. And when you lose with this card, it doesn't feel fair. So I hate this card either way, win or lose with it. So if you high roll Misty onto Articuno going first, right, you could just win the game. And then Starmie EX hitting for 90 damage, just 2 energy with the free retreat is very powerful. So this is still a really good deck. It's just kind of held in check by the Pikachu EX decks. So moving on here, we got Koga at tier 3 actually, and this is the most popular version of the deck. We got 2 Ekans, 2 Arbok, 2 Coughing, and 2 Wheezing. And then for the trainer cards, pretty standard stuff. Draw cards, 1 of red card. I'm seeing a lot of 1 of red cards. I think this is more used in tournament formats. We got a 1x speed. 1 of is fine since Koga is essentially kind of acting like a free retreat anyways. If you don't know what Koga does, he puts your Muck or Wheezing in the active spot into your hand. Muck isn't very popular. He's not as good as Wheezing. Wheezing, though, is a very good card because it's a stage 1 evolution and it has an ability where you can poison the enemy's active Pokemon, and it only attacks for 1 energy. The only downside to Wheezing here is that it has a high retreat cost of 3 energy. That's where Koga comes in, and he can just put it into your hand for free, which is essentially like the same as your retreat. And Wheezing also has 110 HP, which is really nice. And then we have Ekans into Arbok. Arbok is really good for just trapping your opponent's Pokemon. For 2 energy, it's dealing 60 damage, and then during your opponent's next turn, the defending Pokemon can't retreat. So this is really good for just locking in your opponent, right? You can poison them with the Wheezing and then lock them in with the Arbok so they can't retreat to the bench and heal the poison. This is a very deadly combo, and the fact that it's dark means it is super effective against Psychic type decks, which of course Mewtwo EX is Psychic, but there are a lot of other Psychic Pokemon on the ladder right now, and this deck is weak to fighting. But I've seen a drop off in fighting type decks. I don't know about you guys, but that's just me personally. I think this deck is really cool. I think Koga can be really frustrating to play against because you could get your opponent's Wheezing down to very low health. You're about to KO them, and then they just Koga and pull it back to hand, and they're safe, right? Denying you a point. So if you want to play Koga, try this deck out. Seems pretty good. Moving on, we got Articuno EX. And this one, it looks like we have a couple different cards in here. We take a look at a sample deck, though. We see top 16, 256 player tournament. It's just an 18 trainer card deck, right? In my opinion, this deck is just, if I had one word to describe it, it would be cheesy. And what I mean by that is, like, it's not a very, like, good deck, but it still manages to win just because Articuno is such a good card and because Misty is such a broken card. If you high roll, even if you just get 1 Misty heads, right? Like let's say maybe you just play Misty turn 1 and you get 1 energy with Misty. That's all you need to get going. You're attacking next turn then with the Articuno EX Ice Wing. Or if you're going second and you get 1 energy with Misty, then you're attacking that first turn for 40 damage. Then next turn, you're attacking 80 damage plus 10 to your opponent's benched Pokemon. So it's harder for them to build up their bench too, right? And then you have all these trainer cards to help support potions, speed, hand scope, plus red card to shuffle your opponent's hands, Sabrina to manipulate their bench, Giovanni do some extra damage. So personally, I am not a fan of this deck. I think it's just a very cheesy deck. I think it's boring. That's just my opinion, though. You could disagree with me. It's obviously still a tournament winning deck because there is a first place version here. And I'm actually kind of curious. I kind of want to look at this first place version. So this looks pretty similar. Only thing is this one is playing a Pokedex, I believe, instead of a second Pokeball. And to me, that makes sense. I think one Pokeball is fine in this deck because you only have 2 Pokemon in your deck, right? And the game requires you to start with 1. So you're going to start with 1 in your hand. So you don't need 2 Pokeballs. The second Pokeball is essentially a dead card. You just need the 1 Pokeball to fish out your other Articuno. So I like this version actually better than the one we just looked at, just because it cuts the second Pokeball in favor of a Pokedex. So that's the Articuno deck. And then lastly, in tier 3, we have Marowak EX. Now, Marowak here, this is the most popular version. Nothing fancy about it. It's just all about dealing damage, right? Let's look at this top main deck first, and then I want to look at the sample deck down here. So as far as Pokemon, we got 2 Cubone, 2 Marowak EX. We got 2 Mankey, which I believe they're playing the regular Mankey. I don't know if maybe... I believe this should be the promo Mankey. I'm gonna say that maybe this website doesn't have the promo Mankey for some reason, because I don't think there's any reason to play the regular Mankey over the promo Mankey, right? Because Primeape, if you don't know what Primeape does, he's a stage 1 evolution of Mankey, and for 2 energy, he has Fight Back. He deals 40 damage, but if this Pokemon has damage on it, this attack does 60 more damage, so 100 damage total. Now with the promo Mankey, he is essentially the same, except his move deals 30 damage to the opponent's Pokemon and 10 damage to itself, meaning you're setting up your Primeape to be online next turn without your opponent even having to damage you. So I'm just going to guess that this website, for some reason, doesn't have the promo version of Mankey, and I would recommend you just play the promo Mankey. It's just better. It's just objectively better than this version of Mankey. And then, of course, we have the 1-of Hitmonlee. I like a 1-of this card. Just if your opponent is retreating any Pokemon to their bench, any weak Pokemon, you can finish them off with the Hitmonlee. And then let's take a look at the sample deck, which has a bit of a tech to it with the Zubat and the Golbat. Now, the reason for that is because there's a lot of Psychic decks in the meta, and your Mankey and your Primeape are weak to Psychic. For example, Mewtwo, right? And then Zubat and Golbat are Dark types, so they're going to be super effective against Psychic types, and they require colorless energy. So you don't need to play Dark Energy in this deck. You're just playing Fighting Energy. And then, of course, I totally glossed over Marowak EX. I mean, there's not much to say about Marowak EX, right? I mean, it's just a decent EX Pokemon. It's just 140 HP, stage 1 evolution, and for 2 energy, flip 2 coins, does 80 damage for each head. So it can do 0 damage, 80 damage, or 160 damage. And of course, if you're doing 80, that's good. If you're doing 160, you're one-shotting like most Pokemon in the game. So just one of those kind of coin flippy kind of cards. If you don't mind coin flips in this game, then, you know, try out Marowak. Me personally, I like to minimize as many coin flips as I can in this game, but it's not a bad EX Pokemon by any means, but tier 3 does seem to be pretty accurate. And now, moving on to tier 4, this is the bottom of the meta report here. We got Arcanine EX at the bottom of tier 4. Now, this one has been kind of interesting because I've seen it fluctuate up and down. People said, oh, this deck sucks. Oh, this deck is good. Oh, maybe this deck isn't that good. Well, let's take a look at the main version here. We got 2 Growlithe, 2 Arcanine EX, and 2 Moltres EX. Now, I recently shared a video on my channel with an Arcanine EX deck, and it was like an Arcanine Blaine hybrid. And to me, what I think is that deck is more consistent because you're not relying on the Moltres coin flips, right? I'm not a big fan of Moltres because I'm not a big fan of the coin flips with the Inferno Dance, right? Like, I know this is a good card. It is a good card, don't get me wrong. I know it's really good. I'm just not a huge fan of the coin flips with Inferno Dance, personally. That's just my opinion. But I think this deck, this version with Moltres is better in terms of high roll potential, right? Because if you high roll Inferno Dance, like, your Arcanine EX is good to go, like, basically like your second, third turn. So I think this version has more high roll potential, but I think the Blaine hybrid version has more consistency. And then if we take a look at a sample deck here, this one's actually running an Old Amber and an Aerodactyl as a sort of a tech card. I don't know if I agree with this that much. I mean, because Aerodactyl, if you don't know what he does, 2 energy, flip a coin. If heads, your opponent shuffles their active Pokemon into their deck. It's essentially like a soft removal, right? I mean, you could technically win the game if your opponent only has 1 active Pokemon on their field. You play Aerodactyl, it gets shuffled into their opponent's deck, and then they have no more Pokemon, so you just win the game, right? But I don't know if I essentially agree with this in this deck, because Arcanine EX, the main thing with this deck is you want to be hitting for 120 with Arcanine EX, right? Because that's killing so many things in this game, and it kills Pikachu EX, which I think this deck was, usually pretty good against. I want to see some other versions of this deck, actually. Let's look at this top 4. And yeah, this one ditches the Aerodactyl. This one does have a hand scope and 2 red cards, which, again, I think this is more of a tournament tech rather than something you would play on ladder. And only 1 Moltres EX, which is actually a bit surprising. I think you would actually want to play 2 Moltres EX just because the high roll potential is really good, and it has 140 HP, so it's really good to stall with as well. So I think this top main deck is probably what, people are going to be playing the most. Well, it is actually. This is going to be the most popular version of this deck, at least submitted in these community tournaments. But for me personally, I prefer the Arcanine Blaine hybrid. I think that deck is more consistent, and I think it's just more fun. So moving on, now we go to Blaine. Speaking of Blaine, right? So this is the main Blaine deck here. We got 2 Vulpix, 2 Ninetales, and 2 Ponyta, 2 Rapidash. No Magmar in here. Blaine also works with Magmar, but instead we got a 1 of Farfetch'd. Now, I mean, I guess I could see it. I don't hate it. Farfetch'd is not bad, right? It's just a good, cheap Pokemon to deal damage with. And Blaine is a fast, aggressive deck because all these Pokemon are attacking for very low energy cost. If you're going first, you got Ponyta, you evolve into Rapidash on your next turn, and for 1 energy, you're hitting for 40 damage. And then Farfetch'd, again, you're hitting for 40 damage, 1 energy. And then Ninetales, you're hitting for 90 damage with 2 energy. And then, of course, with Blaine, plus 30, you're threatening 120 with Ninetales, 70 with Rapidash. I still like Magmar, though, honestly, as of even like a 1 of. Me, personally, I think I like a Magmar because doing 50 damage for 2 energy, it's not great, but it's not bad either because he's a basic Pokemon. You don't need to evolve him, right? With the Vulpix, you need the Ninetales. With Ponyta, you need the Rapidash to get that extra damage going. But with Magmar, he's just a basic Pokemon. You just fish him out with a Pokeball, and he's doing 50 damage with 2 energy, or he's threatening 80 with Blaine. Let's take a look at another version here. I actually want to see this first place one. I'm kind of curious. And this one, it does look similar to that previous version, but instead of the Farfetch'd, it has a 1 of Magmar, and I agree with this version more. At first glance, like, Magmar is not a great Pokemon, and I don't think he is great or amazing by any means, but I think being able to threaten 80 damage at all times with Blaine is so valuable. So I actually agree with this version of the deck more if you're looking to play Blaine. And this deck is super budget friendly, no EX Pokemon in this deck, so that's really cool to see. And last but not least, we got Blastoise EX. I have been messing with Blastoise decks for so much, been trying so much to find something that works, and this is the top main deck here, and I've kind of concluded something along the same lines here with the Squirtles, the Wartortles, 2 Blastoise EX. You got to run 2 Misty, even though I absolutely hate this card. Again, you got to run 2 Misty with Blastoise EX because he takes 3 energy to deal 100 damage, or he takes 5 energy to deal 160. And of course, you want to get to 5 energy to deal 160 if you can. And then in this one, we have 2 of Meowth. I think I was running a one of Meowth in my deck, but I get the Meowth in this deck. And the reason we're playing Meowth in Blastoise EX is because this deck just heavily relies on seeing your Squirtle, Wartortle, Blastoise. Essentially, you just want to draw as many cards as you possibly can. That way you can find your evolutions, because really this deck is really relying on Blastoise EX Hydro Bazooka. That's it. That's the game plan with this deck, is to just get Hydro Bazooka online as fast as possible. And Misty helps us do that, and Meowth helps us do that as well. And then if we take a look at a sample deck here, this is interesting. We have Mewtwo here, the non-EX Mewtwo, and I assume there's no psychic energy in this person's deck. I can't tell, but I assume they're just using it as a wall. You could also use the non-EX Articuno, which has 100 HP, and I believe it has a 1 retreat cost as well. But I could see the appeal of the 20 extra HP on this Mewtwo, and then you have some fossil tech in here to get around some Sabrina plays, right? So this is it. Blastoise EX, I think, I don't know. I want to say it's a good deck. I really want to like this deck, but I feel like it's just so dependent on the Misty. If there was another way to ramp energy and water type decks without Misty, I think I would enjoy this deck a lot more. But this deck and almost all water type decks are very reliant on Misty. So I really do not like this card. But if you want to play Blastoise, I think this top main deck is probably what you should be looking at here. I could see the appeal of this Mewtwo here. I think what I've been playing personally, actually, if you want to know, is instead of 2 Meowth, I have 1 Meowth and 1 non-EX Articuno. That way Meowth helps draw cards, and then the Articuno helps stall. Because Meowth can draw cards, but he only has 60 HP, so he's very squishy. He's going to die pretty quick, right? So you need Meowth to draw, and you need Articuno to stall. Again, I do get the appeal with Mewtwo, extra 20 health, but if you're just playing water energy, you're not attacking with this Mewtwo. He's just there, right? Like sometimes if you high roll with Misty onto your non-EX Articuno, you can attack with it. So personally, I prefer just basic Articuno over basic Mewtwo in this deck. And that's it. That's all the decks on this tier list. I think for the most part, I want to say I agree. I think this tier list is pretty dang accurate at the moment. I'm happy to see Charizard moving up the ranks. He's my favorite Pokemon from the first gen of Pokemon, and it does feel good to have my suspicions confirmed that Mewtwo EX was the stronger deck. Now, of course, you know, data could change. Maybe next week Pikachu EX is back on top, but for now Mewtwo EX is on top of the meta. So let me know what you guys think. Do you agree with this tier list? Do you disagree with this tier list? I'm going to go ahead and leave a link to this website in the description below this video so you can check out all the data for yourselves as well. And again, I'm going to have timestamps with all the decks from this video so you can go back and look at the specific decks. So thank you guys so much for watching. Appreciate you, and I'll see you all next week for another meta review. Appreciate you guys. See you next week. Later.